Welcome to the DEA Chicago Podcast. I'm Luis Agostini. Over the next several episodes, we speak with families who have lost loved ones due to fatal fentanyl poisonings. We'll also hear from the DEA agent whose team investigated and successfully charged the drug dealers responsible for their deaths. In this episode, we speak with Diana Estep, a mother from New Martinsville, West Virginia. Diana lost her son to a fatal fentanyl poisoning back in October of 2020. Let's get right to our conversation with Mrs. Estep. For those of us who did not have the pleasure of meeting or knowing Andrew, feel free to take as much time as you need. Just tell us, who was Drew? What kind of kid was he? What was he into as a kid? Hobbies, sports, quirks, talents, and just guide us through from, his transition to becoming a young man. And just tell us about Drew.
Okay. Drew, as a child, was full of energy. Never had a dull moment with Drew. Ornery. Always trying to make people laugh. And that's something about Drew that until his last days on earth, he always wanted to make everybody around him laugh. He took pride in the fact that he could make people laugh and forget their troubles. Everywhere he went, he would tell us how, oh, Mom, Dad, everyone thinks I should try comedy. And he really did have a knack for saying the funniest things, acting funny. When he was a kid, from the time he was little till always, he would make nicknames for everybody. And it's kind of crazy that, that was in grade school. Middle school, he would give everybody a nickname. And to this day, those kids still go by the nicknames that Drew would just come to the top of his head, and he would say something crazy that, kind of correlated with the letters in their name or their personality. So, he just always wanted to make people happy. And even when he was sad on the inside, he covered it up by trying to be humorous for other people to just smile. Drew loved sports. Played all sports from the time he could play them. He started off with, little leagues and then progressed to high school. He played football, basketball, soccer, ran track, baseball. We watched sports together. He was an avid WVU sports. We attended games together. That was kind of our thing. We would go to all the football games and the basketball games. Loved the Pittsburgh Steelers. Would call when he was later in life, would always call and want to talk to his dad when the Steelers played, even if he was not doing very well in his life and his addiction. That was the one thing that always kind of that they had a connection with, is he would want to talk to his dad about the Steelers and football or WVU. It's hard. It's very hard to, I think about this all the time when I know I'm going to have an opportunity to let everybody know who Drew was. I think about it ahead of time in my head. And I prepare, okay, I'm going to say this fact about him. I'm going to say this. And I don't think, and I know that people say all the time, I can't imagine what you're going through. I can't imagine that. And you know what? You can't, because I find when I tell who Drew was, I find we say Drew was, because there will be no more Drew. Parents their children are still alive. They'll say, well, my child was really ornery as a child. And, but there's that person's still here. So 10 years from now, they'll say, my child did this at his wedding, or my child did this when he had a first, my child was this way when, he became a parent, because those parents still get the chance for lots more, my child was, because we don't. We want to do justice, because there's no more. When I say Drew was this, that's all. That's all I can say. And I want to tell his story in the best way that I can. And it's hard to come across and get everything out there that we want people to know about them, because their lives mattered and they're no longer here. And we all want our children to be remembered and to speak their name and continue to keep them alive through their memory.
And hopefully this helps with having a platform to try to share as much as possible about Drew.
It does. It really does. And, I'm just very fortunate and thankful every opportunity that I do get to tell about Drew, to explain who Drew was, to help society to end the stigma. Drew suffered greatly, as do many Americans, and society sometimes just doesn't see the person they are. They're quick to judge. They're quick to, think their lives didn't matter, that there's nobody on the other side that cares about them. And I think my one mission is to just kind of put it out there with other parents that these were our children. They were beautiful souls. Substance abuse does not discriminate against any, equal opportunity, no matter your walk of life or your age or your, anything. It affects everybody. It's something they didn't ask for. It's a disease, and nobody wants to live the way that these diseased people live. They don't want this, and society thinks differently. So I'm happy to be able to use Drew's name and his story to show something different to society.
Thanks. So I know, I wasn't here that long when I took your phone call. I took your call. And that was the first phone call I received from a parent. And that was my first time responding to something like that. And I promised myself I would take it as seriously as possible. And, we passed it on to Gannon's team. And unfortunately, so sometimes we do receive calls from parents where they want, obviously, rightfully so, they want justice, but there's so many circumstances, whether it's lack of evidence or so much time that's passed, or just even within their own jurisdictions, the bar for prosecution or getting charges approved is so high. But, Gannon, thankfully, chased this down. And remember, he called me back, I think, the next day and was like, hey, we actually have something here. But I'm just, going back to my first experience speaking with you. If it's okay, just kind of walk me through the day when you found out what happened to Drew.
Yeah. Through Drew's journey of rehab, stays in multiple states, we constantly, anywhere that I could research and find that gave me hope, didn't matter what state it was in. Mom was getting airfare, lining up for him to get help. And then he would always, after the rehab, try to stay in sober livings, try to get on his feet, get a job, would relapse quite often. And during those relapses, there would be days that we didn't really hear from Drew. We kind of, as our journey progressed through this lifestyle, always had the relationship with Drew that if you're clean and you want help, no, I rewind that. Not if you're clean, yes, we'll be here for you and help you in any way we can. If you're in active addiction, all you have to do is call and say help, and we'll pick up. But if you're in active addiction, we can't enable you to pretend that nothing's wrong. We have to step away after this progressed for as long as Drew suffered. So, during those times that we knew he was in active addiction, we kind of distanced ourselves and just waited to hear from him with a message or a text or a call saying, I want help me. I need out. So there would be days that would go by in the past that you maybe wouldn't hear from Drew, and we would panic. And, I called hospitals in different states where he was. I called jails. It seemed that, fortunately during those times, he would always turn up. We would look on his social media to see if his light was active, that he was on Facebook Messenger. And then you would breathe a sigh of relief. Well, he's just not posting anything, but he's on there. So that had happened, and it seemed that, like I say, it always within a day or two, he turned up somewhere, and it would always be like, well, I was just asleep. I hadn't slept for a week. I was just sleeping for 2 days. But this day I had a feeling different in my gut. It had been 3 or 4 days, and I was just very, very uneasy, unrestful feeling. And for some reason, towards that evening, I decided to check into how to do a wellness check. I had never done that in the past, had always reached out to friends or people to see if they had heard from Drew. So I kind of did that at this point, and nobody had either. So I did a wellness check. And sadly, it took a long time to get the actual news and word from our local police, because when I did the wellness check, it was a weekend, and they right away got back with me and said that nobody answered the door, that they were going to have to find to his apartment. They would have to find the, I guess you want to say, owner of the apartments or maintenance or somebody to let them in. So my husband and I sat here and we waited and we waited. And I don't even know. It could have been an hour and a half or 2 hours go by, and there's nothing you can do. I called the police back 2 or maybe 2 different times, and they, I think at that point they did know, but they weren't telling me over the phone. They wanted to get a hold of the police in our town to come to our house. So eventually, I'm going to say a couple hours later, and I kept in my mind thinking that, well, maybe they just couldn't get in. Maybe they couldn't get the maintenance person to get there yet, But we were sitting in our living room, and we see the police car turn the corner. We live on the corner of a street, and we see the police car turn the corner. And they passed our house, and our next door neighbor has had some issues in the past with being with substance abuse, and they went past our house, past his house, and kind of pulled into park. And I thought to myself, oh, it's Ryan. Ryan's in trouble. They're not coming here. And so I went out on my porch. We went out, and they walked up the sidewalk. And when I saw they passed his house and started walking closer to ours, I just couldn't let them come on my porch. We met them on the sidewalk, and it just, I would rehearse those words in my head so many times during his disease. So many times I would say, Drew, you're going to die. Drew, you're going to die. You're not going to live. You're going to die. And I think as a parent, we do that to try to maybe prepare ourselves so when the words are real, that we've already heard them in our own head. But it's nothing. There's no words to describe when it's real. The police handed us a phone number and said we were to call this number. I believe, if I remember right, it was the coroner, but they said, your son is deceased, and here's the number. We're very sorry for your loss. We live in a small town, and one of the police had graduated with our daughter, which made it even harder on, the personal level that he knew us. I kind of stood there and started to walk back towards the house and started up the steps, and I kind of collapsed. And my husband picked me up, and I do not remember the sound I made, but I do know when we did our impact statements for the court, I do know that, my husband described the noise that I made like an animal crying, and he had never heard the noise in his life. And I don't remember making it, but he picked me up and carried me in the house. And from that point on, your life is never the same.
I have a 21-year-old son. He's in the Marines. I also have an 11-month-old son. And I think after my youngest was born, like it goes back to what you said, and I can't imagine, but I think I would say the empathy and the pain, that shared pain, like definitely it hits for myself. It hits more.
Mm-hmm.
I know it doesn't really do much. I'm just.
Well, to have people listen, it helps. You know what I mean? I find a lot of people, they say, oh, I'm sorry, but then at the end of the day, the ones that take the time to let you speak their name and tell the story, just listening is empathy, and I do appreciate that. But it's hard. Our youngest daughter recently it's our first grandchild. She had a little boy in June. She asked me to stay in with she and her husband and get to experience it and kind of take pictures when they, first got to hold him. So I was in there, and I can't even put into words the how bittersweet the moment was as I watched him be born, and I watched them place him in Bailey's arms, and her husband's beside her, leaning down, and the joy in their eyes and their face. And here he is. Here's this child that you brought into the world to love and to protect, and all your joys are right here. You did this, you're going to love him and protect him. And it just took me back to, that was Steve and I, and that was Drew. He was our firstborn. He was a boy. I brought him into the world the same way they did, but I couldn't save him. I couldn't save him and protect him. And it's just, nobody knows. Nobody knows. And that's where I say nobody is, immune to this possibly popping up at some point in their life with this, disease. I never would have imagined that, when they placed Drew in our arms, that, fast forward, 15 years from that happy moment, that we would start suffering, all of us as a family. And Drew used to say, and I used to get so mad at him, and, since his past, I've kind of have a better understanding of some of the things that he said that I wish I could have understood better in the time. But fighting addiction makes you angry. It's just human nature. And at times I was fighting the addiction, but yet that was him I was fighting at the same time. So it's just a terrible thing to suffer. What it does to your family, even before the loss of a life, how it tears you apart, and things are said and behavior's done. And it's just, he used to say to me, Mom, you're sick too. And I would be like, those words would make me angry, because in my mind I'm saying, I don't have a substance abuse problem. I am happily married. I feel I'm a successful mother to my daughters. I try to be one to you, but it's not me. This isn't me. But addiction makes the whole entire family suffer and sick. And I understand that now. Because it's horrific to go through, and then you fight, and in the end it took his life. And it wasn't easy when he was here. The addiction was not easy on anybody. And if Drew had to live that way forever, I don't think that I would wish that for him or anybody, to be in that much pain and to have that much suffering. He used to say, Mom, people think it's fun. Do you think it's fun what I'm doing? Do you think this is fun doing this? Because it's not. And I think society just, thinks they enjoy doing it. Like it's somebody going out to a bar that doesn't have a problem and, drinking one night and having a great grand old time. But it's not for them, because, he described it before, like early on in the beginning of the substance misuse, that, marijuana, I can't breathe without it. I can't breathe. And, they can't function, because he would say, I can't be alone inside my own head. You don't understand what that's like, Mom. I can't be alone with myself. And, no, I don't understand. And I don't think society does.
So how were you able to manage to cope and honestly stay alive and just function in the days and weeks and months that followed after Drew's passing?
It's kind of a blur. I feel as parents that we tell ourselves, you're kind of in that fog for a while, and you tell yourself, okay, and Drew was October, so, we had holidays coming up in November and December, and you try to tell yourself, okay, if I get through the first Christmas, if I get, and then his birthday was in January. So November, December, January, boom, the first 3 months we had, things that made it worse than, every day's bad, but on these certain dates, it's worse than bad. So you kind of just tell yourself, okay, I made it through the first Thanksgiving. We made it through Christmas. We made it through his birthday. Then you fast forward till where, you're making it to, okay, October 7th, that's going to be the anniversary, the first year anniversary of his passing. I get through that. And then you realize that there is no finish line. It's kind of like you deceive yourself, like, oh, if I get through one Christmas, I'll, But then I found that during the second year, it was even worse than the first year, because reality set in that I'm going to be saying, this is the 8th year without Drew at Christmas. This is the 10th year. I hope to live that long and to be able to be, many years. But yet I'm going to be, if that makes sense, like, it's reality, and it's just going to be a long, long time. It's forever. It's forever. But I think that first year, you're just pushing yourself to say, you have to get through this without them. You have to learn to get through this. But then you do, and it's like, wow, that wasn't a finish line. It was just the beginning of a horrible pain without them.
So I'm going to transition from that to the investigation. So at what point during this whole time that you're dealing with tragedy and pain did the thoughts or just that desire for justice and begin taking the steps to find accountability? At what point did you know you wanted justice, or that you wanted someone held accountable? And just walk us through that time and the conversations you had at that time and what you heard back.
Okay, so as I said, we're from West Virginia, and Drew had been in Indiana and had completed a 30-day inpatient program, had transitioned into the sober living houses. Right after Drew passed, on his Facebook, there were a lot of people reaching out and commenting, and condolences on Facebook. And a couple of names, the things that they said kind of struck us, like, they were in the sober home or really close to him. So kind of made a connection with these individuals on Facebook and in Messenger, and pretty much right away we were given a name. And I never thought that would be a thing, being that we weren't from Indiana. Initially in the first few days, this took a couple of days for this to transpire, to reach out to each other. First few days I thought, well, there will be no talk. We're not from there. We'll never know or exactly what happened, but seemed pretty adamant, these individuals, that they knew who did it. And when we spoke with the coroner and we called, as soon as we were supposed to call, the very first thing they said was, would Drew want to harm himself? And we were kind of like, no. And we thought that was kind of odd. And they went on to say that there was no drug paraphernalia, no needles, no anything to lead them to, upon arrivals, be 100% sure that that's what happened. So I'm assuming they were just asking us basically if we knew if there was any other way that he could have, why he would be deceased. Then you fast forward to the toxicology, which came back for fentanyl. But when that happened, I had the name. So I believe, if I remember how this all took place, I reached out to the local Bloomington Police Department, and I told them that I was given a name, and that the name of the individual, gave the name of the individual, and detective was, very kind to listen, and he said that, he would look into it. So I believe the next time I talked to him, he had looked up photographs on social media of the individual, and I do know because there was a video camera at Drew's apartment. So I think that during their investigation, they did have an individual that was last seen with Drew, but they of course didn't have a name at that point. They had the video, and the detective said, from the name you gave me and looking at the individual's picture on social media that I can find, I don't think it's the same person. And I proceeded to say, that's an old social media that, the people in the area swear up and down that it's him. So he said, I'll keep looking into this. So ironically, this was October 20th. Drew was found on October 11th after the wellness check. So only like 9 days had gone by. For whatever reason, do not know why, my sister was on social media looking up things about the area. She happened to find this individual had been arrested and had wrecked with a lot of drugs and had been arrested. And the picture for his arrest, because I called the detective in Bloomington then, and I said, well, I want to tell you this individual has been arrested. Here is his mugshot. Can you compare this with the video? So the detective said, okay. So when they looked into it, they were like, yes, that absolutely is the name that was given to us. So he was in jail in a bordering county where he had wrecked with drugs in his possession, quite a bit of drugs. So I then had numerous calls with the Bloomington police. We're going to do this, and it was during COVID, so that kind of played a factor. We're going to go interview him at the jail and question him at the very least. Well, we can't get in because of COVID. We had to do a phone interview. Do we think that he was the one that sold the drugs to your son? We do, but could we ultimately prove that in court? Probably not. So, I at that point said, can I talk to the prosecutor? I want to, have a chance to speak with Erica about this. She did speak with me, and again, listened to me, gave me all the time I needed, but just that statement of, we can't prove this. Sadly, in these cases, sometimes we feel we know, but we just can't. We can't prove that in a court of law. And I will have to say that this whole time that I'm pushing, and months went by, I'm going to say probably close to a year went by. The reason that I had the drive in the beginning was because I belong to a group on Facebook, and it's drug-induced homicide. And the founder of the group is a retired police officer from Chicago who founded this group after she lost her daughter and had a really, really hard time trying to get the law, which were her brother's police officers, her family, to actually do an investigation and feel that these type of deaths deserve an investigation. So she was the one who, listened to all the facts that I knew, the things that I was telling her that the police had, that we're doing, that they were doing, and, pushed me, from a law perspective. I think you do have something here. I think you can prove this. I think you need to. So I stayed active. With it, and through her encouragement that, look, you do have a case. They need, don't stop. And she had told me at one point, go above the police. So go to the DEA. So before I was able to actually have communication with you and Mike Gannon, I started looking up just a number for the DEA. And I do not remember if I got a Washington, D.C. number. I don't know. But I did get somebody to listen originally. And I did get a detective before I got to Mike. And he worked with me for quite some time. He even went back to to Erica, to the prosecutor, to see if, there was anything different that could be done. Can we this, can we that? What if I can get you this or this or this? And again, it was still kind of shut down at that point. So again, I threatened to sue the Bloomington police. I was just anybody that would listen to me, like, this is not right. This is not right. So then I had gotten up one night to let the dog out. It was the middle of the night, and I always bring my phone with me. So while my dog's going to the bathroom, I'm scrolling on Facebook, and I see where this founder of drug-induced homicide, Terry Almanzo, the retired cop, she had tagged me in a video. And so I clicked to the video, and it was Mike Gannon, and he was doing an interview explaining about, I believe, and I may be wrong on the date, in 2018 when the law was put into place. If you deal a drug, an illicit drug, and we can prove that you cause bodily damage or death, and we can prove that, we're going to come after you. And I thought, okay. So I said to Terry, what do I do now? How do I get to this person? Terry was the one that, I'm not really sure how Terry got your name, but Terry says to contact you and start there. And that leads me to where, I called and was able to locate you and say, will you listen? I want to talk to Mike. I saw Mike, he said this, and I remember saying that to you. This is what he said, if you can prove it. Well, I think we can prove it. And I'm so fortunate that you listened. You could have thought, oh my goodness, this woman is just, who is this woman? But you didn't. You passed it on. And you're right. Within a day, Mike Gannon called me and he said, I really think there's something here. I cannot promise you that, we can get it to the point that, we can hold accountability. He said, but I want you to, when you put your head on your pillow tonight, Mom, I want you to be assured that I think, God led you to this path for a reason. And what I can promise you is that we will investigate every possible thing that we can. And if we can't, you'll be the first to know. But I can promise you, I can't promise you that we'll find enough, but I promise you we'll leave no stone unturned. And from there, it was just constant attention, constant, we're working for you. We're going to do all we can. It was a miracle. It was a miracle. And I do, and I know that I told Mike this several times, that during the time of giving up and then fighting again, giving up, fighting up, I had a dream, and Drew came to me in my dream, and he wanted me to know in the dream, and it was a vivid dream. He wanted me to keep going. He wanted me to keep going. And in the dream, it was, everyone was saying, they can't find out. How are they going to find out? And Drew, in the dream, very clearly said to me, I can tell them everything they want to know. I was there. Just ask me. And so I feel that was Drew working through me to get the answers, because he wanted us to know what happened, and he also wouldn't want anybody else to suffer. And I do feel that nothing brings our children back. Putting him in jail, it doesn't take away the fact that, okay, he suffered because he took Drew away. But while they are being held accountable, they're not doing it to anybody else. And that's enough. That's enough for us. We try to do this and bring awareness so no family has to do what we've had to do. Live our life with a hole, an empty chair. No matter what our happiest moments are, this is always in the front of your mind. You go through these times, like I say, our daughter getting married, having a baby. These are happy moments, but never the way they're supposed to be, because they're not here with us. So we go through the rest of our life going through these milestones with this heavy, heavy heart and trying to pretend we're okay, because that's all we can do.
Before Drew's passing, were you familiar with fentanyl? I know you had stated Drew was battling addiction, but I guess maybe talk me through your understanding of what was happening on a broader sense across the country with fentanyl and the opioid crisis. What was your level of understanding before Drew was gone?
Well, I think being that Drew passed in 2020, and Drew's drug of choice, honestly, was more meth. And I say that because when I say Drew was full of energy his whole life, Drew had ADHD. We did the, therapist probably from the time he was in kindergarten. We went through different medications, always side effects, never really got to a level that, we felt that it was really ever controlled. So when Drew found that meth could kind of do what he needed to do to slow his brain down, to kind of slow him down, I think that's why he was so attracted to that. After it took more and more of that to help his brain, then he would be periods where, and I know, and he even, confirmed this, he turned kind of to heroin and opioids to help him after he had done, the meth for so long and he hadn't slept, and he needed to kind of come down off of that from withdrawal. So we weren't as familiar with opioids because Drew he had mentioned them before, but he tended to, his self-medication with methamphetamines kind of led him to turn to those a lot in the end. I feel like if fentanyl in 2020 or, even before Drew's passing, I feel like, if it were that being put into meth, being put into other things, all the fake pills out there, I just didn't hear that much about it. Like, let's say 2017 and 18, I do know towards the end that, he would tell us that so-and-so overdosed and he got fentanyl. So I think it was kind of a thing more towards the end of Drew's illness that it became more a common thing. Drew, to our knowledge, didn't really have any overdoses until probably the last year of his life. And then there were a couple. Fortunately, there was somebody around to give him Narcan. I don't know that he was ever tested to say if it could have been fentanyl or what could have caused this. But, I do know that, and it's still to this day, I don't understand why Drew was by himself, because he would always say, I'm not going to die. I don't use alone. I'm never going to die because I don't use alone. And I knew Drew, took pride in the fact of telling us that he had been places where, friends would overdose and that he stayed. He would never, ever leave. And he would say, some people take off because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble. They're an addict too. And, Drew's like, I've called the ambulance before. I've called the police. I've stayed. I'll never do that to somebody. And I don't use alone. And to this day, that's just the one piece of the puzzle that doesn't make sense is why Drew used alone and how that played out, because that was his number one rule, is that, I'm not going to die because I'm going to have somebody with me. But it didn't turn out that way. And I really think that if fentanyl would have been as bad back when, like I say, in 2016, 17, 18, when he was, in the addiction, that, it wouldn't have been 2020. I feel that Drew did use on such a regular basis that it's just a matter of time when it's that much of a problem. It's just a matter of time. It's not when, or it's not if, it's when.
So back to the investigation. So Gannon, DEA takes over. What evidence, from your understanding, what evidence did we have that really helped us secure charges against Garrett Hacker?
Okay. I know that, when I spoke to Mike Gannon in the original call, he said, I'm gonna give this to one of my best guys, and we'll be in touch. And pretty much, like I say, everything was very fast. Within the next day, I received the call, and they went back to the Bloomington Police Department, to reopen the case. And I think, from what I learned, I was mad at the Bloomington Police Department all along. They said they thought they knew who did it, but they couldn't prove it. So I took that to mean that they didn't care. But I was corrected in the fact that they did the best of their ability to get it to the level that they did. And I was told several times by the detective that actually, they did do a very thorough investigation. And I still tell myself, I could be wrong, but I tell myself that the thorough investigation when they found Drew was because it didn't scream, this is just a junkie that put a drug in their system and died, and they shouldn't have used the drug. So I think, and I could be wrong, but that's just my intuition, is that upon the scene, it wasn't really clear. So things were investigated. The entire, apartment was thoroughly gone over. And, had that not happened and the things that happened, then it couldn't have really, when the DEA got to it, enough with, they built upon what the local police had. And, like I say, how did we get so fortunate that there was a video camera? I mean, our girls, in their college apartments at WVU, they didn't have video surveillance. Okay. Drew's apartment, he was on the college campus in Bloomington, a video camera right outside his door. And then other things that played into it. Okay. Had his apartment been on the first floor, that video camera wouldn't have made the difference, because somebody could have came and gone through a window on the ground floor. Drew wasn't on the ground floor. So there was no way, that was the main way that anybody came or left Drew's apartment. So they took the things and then were able to, take, bank records, withdrawals, compare things, take pieces from the original interview that the local Bloomington police had done, from the original interview with the dealer, and, pick that apart and be able to prove that, what he said he was there for wasn't what he was there for. So, the video camera, that was huge. And being not on the ground floor was huge. And the time frame and the cell phone, all these things, and especially the cell phone and things like that. There's so much information in these cases if these things can be properly looked into and the pieces put together.
How did you feel once, was it Justin or Gannon, once they told you that they were successful in bringing charges against Garrett Hacker?
Oh, wow. I mean, Justin would check in during the investigation on, I'm going to say it was probably 6 or 7 months. He religiously would check in every 2 weeks. No more than 2 weeks would go by. And he would call just, to let me know that, everything was going okay. And, it's a work in progress, clearly cannot tell me details at that point whatsoever, but he would, always, I'd answer the phone and he'd say, how are you, Miss Estep? And I'd say, well, I don't know, Justin, you tell me, how am I? Because I just was always hanging on for him to say the words, we've reached a point that we just can't go any further. And, Justin always promised that if it got to that point, we would have a sit down. He would come to West Virginia. We'd have a sit down talk, and I would learn everything that they had. and, why it just couldn't go any further. So, every call when he would check in just to let me know, we're still going forward. We're still good. We're still going forward. So when it actually 6 or 7 months into it, when I got the call, like I knew that, he had told me he was presenting, he was going to go to Erica and present the prosecutor and present his case, and, how much work he puts into these cases for his presentation. And at that point, she could either, say what she said before, or she could say, okay, let's go forward. So I knew it was happening. So just waiting, and I got that call, and I can't describe it. I can't describe it. I just, like I say, I just feel like that's a chapter in the story that what very small percentage of people ever get to know the truth of how it happened. And that's it too, the how, I wasn't there, but what happened. So not only that, but the accountability, he's off the streets, he's not going to sell to anybody else. And maybe, just maybe, it's going to affect him. We read the impact statements. Do I know if it impacted him? I don't know, but I hope it did. I hope he has time to sit there and think about what he did. And I do know he is a parent. I don't think he, with the trouble that he had been having, was probably in his children's life with the life he was living. But, maybe that'll make him a better parent. Maybe he'll look at his children and realize that, as a parent, I took somebody's child away, and maybe he'll learn from that. And when he is released, maybe he'll never go back to this again.
So, sentencing, he received 20 years. What was it like to be in the courtroom for sentencing with Garrett Hacker in the same room?
Nothing that I can put into words. You sit across, he comes in and he sits down, and as a family, we're all sitting there together, and, you want him to make eye contact with you, so you want to know if he looks into your eyes to see the pain in your eyes. But I feel that he didn't look our way. So then it's time to go up and sit with the judge while you read your impact statement. I remember asking my family, because of course I'm reading it, and every now and then I would look up, and of course during those moments he wasn't really looking at me, he was looking down. I asked my family, did he ever look at me? Because I wanted him to look at me and see my pain and look at my eyes. And they didn't feel that he really did. So as parents and loved ones, you walk away from it, saying what you wanted to say, knowing that he had to listen. But did it impact him? Did he feel our pain? I hope so. I hope he felt our pain. But, it's the end of a chapter. We didn't want to have to write the book to start with, but it is an end to the chapter of, feeling fortunate that such a small percentage of the families ever get the truth, ever get to hold somebody accountable. And, we did. So it was a chapter that if we were in the book, I'm definitely glad we got that chapter. And, owe so much to Mike and Justin and the DEA and, Detective Rogers and the Bloomington Police Department, because I feel like everything along the way, one step couldn't have happened without the step, prior to that. So I feel like we were fortunate in the beginning that things did happen locally with the police. And then I was able to get the DEA involved and, get the like I say, what the words that were said is, we can't promise you, we'll never promise you, Ms. Estep, we'll never promise you that we can hold someone accountable, but we can promise there's no stone we've unturned for your child. His life mattered, and we'll do all we can for you. And I cannot sing their praises enough. That's all I can say is I don't miss an opportunity to tell anybody that I meet in this journey and on this path what wonderful human beings that I was able to fine with the DEA. And, I want this for everybody else that I meet. I want I want everybody to be able to experience what Mike and Justin did for me. That's my only hope, is that others can have this as well.
So you described this as the closing of a chapter. What do you think the next chapters look like? Where do you go from here? Especially when it comes to remembering and still mourning and honoring Drew.
I think it kind of continues on the path that I've been doing, and by doing so, one connection has led to another connection for opportunities. We recently just had the opportunity last week there was a storytelling summit where they travel, and it's a very, very popular YouTube, lots of views channel that they put together, to let us tell our stories. It's not only about, fentanyl, it's about sex trafficking, it's about recovery, it's about, just actual life stories. And, the people that I met on that journey, that'll be released in the fall. I just want to use this opportunity to help anybody I can, the groups that I belong to. I constantly reach out to people, networking. That's kind of, like I say, the networking was what led Terry, the actual video that she tagged me in was, from Derek Maltz, who is a retired DEA agent. He was the one that posted it on his social media. So I feel that as families and for myself, we stay active on social media with these groups, and, we meet people anytime we know, that we can help them out or we can make a connection. It's all about making connections. And I feel like through this journey of meeting people, speaking Drew's name, telling his story, that as each opportunity comes to me, I'll find more and more ways that I can save others while telling his story, and, be a part of awareness, education, anything that I can do through his name.
For other families that are experiencing that, this experience is more recent for them, and they're also coping and going through this, what advice would you have for them?
My advice would be probably just to let them know that everybody, as for grief, everybody handles it in their own way. There is no right way to grieve. There is no time frame on grief. I feel that, they have to do what's best for them. And, some people that suffered the way we suffered with the disease, when it's over, they walk away and don't ever want to hear the word again because it was so painful. For myself, we kind of talked about that before Drew passed. Like, if the day ever came that he didn't survive this, would we just walk away or would we stay active? And I feel for me, that was something that I didn't know until it happened. I don't think I could have predicted what I would do if it came to this. Would I just want to pretend I'd never heard the word addiction, or I didn't know what a drug was, and just say, I'm done. Okay, I'm done. We lost at this, and let's just walk away and not ever talk about it again. But I found out in the moment that I'm too much of a fighter. And I know that Drew was a fighter through the disease, and he just couldn't fight it enough, and it got the best of him. But I feel like by me fighting forward, that Drew would be proud of me for doing that. And, even all the times that I would fight to get Drew help, he would at times think I was fighting him and it was against him. But then when he would be clean, he would say, Mom, if it weren't for you, I probably wouldn't be here right now. Thank you. I mean, I think that under all the lies that addiction let him think, he did truly believe that I fought for him. And I can't fight for him now, so I'm going to fight for others. I'm going to fight fentanyl. I'm going to fight what's going on in our country with fentanyl. I'm going to fight the fact that we're losing a generation. And if you take it a step further, we're losing 2 generations, because the generation that we're losing is a generation that's supposed to be putting future Americans. They're supposed to be having children. So you take this age group of 18 to 40-year-olds, 44-year-olds, they're supposed to have children. So we're, 300,000 less of them having, what's happening to that generation? It's going to be affected for 2 generations. And, I'm want to help others receive that end chapter that I did. And, I want to put myself out there to help in any way that I can.
That's the last question I had. Now is the chance. Anything else that you personally wanted to, that maybe you didn't mention or didn't get a chance to address? Anything? Any final words?
I just think that I was asked this in another interview. What if Drew were here now? What would I say to him? And I think if Drew were here right now, that I would apologize to him that he only got to live to be 24. And I would apologize for all the things that he's never going to get to see and experience because of such a short life. But more than that, I would want him to know how sorry I am that so much of those 24 years were painful as they were. I feel like in taking the fighting stance that I did, the whole addiction of not enabling, I'm not going to enable, I feel it's sometimes that I just didn't get to love Drew the way I could have loved him without addiction. And I'm sorry that, I wish I could have done a better job, but it made me fight, it made me mad, and it made me angry. And it took away from me getting to love Drew the way a mom should love a child, because it's horrible. It's a horrible life, and it was horrible. And yes, Drew, it made us sick as well. And I see that now. And if I could go back and do things differently, I would have fought the addiction, but I would have found a way to find that middle ground and do it differently and not let it control my seeing who my son really was. Because, society doesn't at times, and I'll be the first to admit, I would be angry and wouldn't see Drew for who he was at times too, because it controls their brain, and it's just, there aren't words for how horrific it is. And I wish that we could end it. I wish we could help everybody not have to live that life.
That's it for this edition of the DEA Chicago Podcast. In the next and final episode of 2024, we'll hear from Michael Gannon, the DEA Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Indianapolis District Office. His team investigated both of Jacob Lampe and Andrew Estep's deaths. Until then, thanks for joining us, and stay safe.